previously we had so-called captured state, where basically corruption was on a highest level, and it was a whole corrupt system.
This regime came to power with officially 10 deaths in 2008, March 1st. So they already had that on their shoulders. An investigation wasn't done. Nobody was punished.
Well, all the courts, all the law enforcement bodies, they all were under the control of corrupt system. So you can't fight corruption through courts, through law enforcement, democratic elections, nothing, when it's going against the corruption interests of high-ranking officials.
Armenia needed and still needs a systemic answer for systemic problems. The problems were not just superficial or at random problems. They were very core problems.
Lousineh, in April of 2018, there was a change in Armenia, is that right?
There was a big change in Armenia. There was a velvet revolution in Armenia.
And was there really a revolution?
It was.
Yes.
Because we managed to get rid of Sargsyan's regime.
If what happened last spring was a revolution, and I insist it was a revolution, it means we need a sort of an inception of the state, which means getting the basics right. So it is the separation of the three branches of power and their independent functioning. It is a proper practice of elections and rounds of such elections.
The first democratic, legitimate elections after 1991.
The people were free to express their voice, and they did so. And the present government, or the present legislative, has over 70%, which is, nobody doubts that, nobody. So what we had the executive in the new government's hands, and we had the legislative in the new government's hands, but the judiciary was still the holdback from the previous criminal regime. And by the way, I want to emphasize this thing, criminal regime. This is not my words, this is Pashinyan's words. You know, he was the one who was saying it's criminal. I agree with him on that.
Now this system of corruption is broken. It's gone. Of course, we have many problems. I mean, it isn't ideal. It could be better. It can be better. But we face real problems with when we're speaking about reforms. Reforms are going very slow.
Was there really a revolution?
We believed there was. Turned out there wasn't. We actually started a revolution, and we handed over the control over it to the flag bearer of the revolution, Nikol Pashinyan, and he turned it into a not even a change of power, but a partial change of power, like Attorney General's position, which is called Prosecutor General in Armenia. We have an old regime representative, we have a constitutional court chairman who's from the old regime, and Pashinyan and his team are trying to remove him, but they are unsuccessful to this date.
To give the American Revolution as an example, it would be ludicrous to have a revolution and then keep some of King George's appointed judges in the newly formed states. You get rid of the judges, you get rid of the governors, and you place your own.
The most serious threat to the government, for example, is really not from former President Karapetyan or the old Republican elite. The real threat is dangerously high expectations. And this is actually a crisis where the government must not give in to the temptation to cut corners.
The freedoms that we got after the revolution are irreversible. There is no going back. That's a good thing. The bad thing is that because revolutionary laws were not applied, the previous regime thinks that they can come back. I say thinks because I personally believe they cannot. because people will not accept them. People do not have a short memory. Yes, they may be disappointed in Nikol Pashinyan, but they know who the previous was.
This government has a rare commodity in the region: legitimacy. A free and fair election combined with popular support, with greater political will. Therefore, we hold this government to a higher degree, a higher standard of expectations.
We have a policy of zero tolerance towards corruption. So we're not going to say, well, in all societies there is some level of corruption, so we're going to tolerate it here and there. We are going to go till the end, eliminating corruption, and it also needs to become embedded in the dominant culture of the people.
We know that the majority of the government and the most high-ranking officials, let's say head of parliament, head of government, deputy heads of government, they are not corrupt.
Yes, but isn't it true that we should aim for 100%?
Of course, we should, and there is also another problem. They are unexperienced. We should take it into account.
But you know, it's better to have an unexperienced, non-corrupt person than a corrupt, experienced
Of course, it's better.
Especially a corrupt, experienced person.
To those who say, give this government some time, let's imagine you're the founder of a large company or a president of a large company, or even not a large company, a medium-sized company, and you hire a CEO. You put him in charge of all the operations. You put a huge trust in him. And in 2-3 months, your company starts going down because of what or how the CEO runs it. What do? You say, give him some more time. What do you do in 1.5 years? What do you do in 2 years? You say, oh, let's give him some time, maybe he'll correct things. If things don't get better, they get only worse. And the previous CEO, who was fired by the whole team and shareholders, by the board, by yourself, the former CEO consolidates his power, his people inside your own company, and you never remove those people, and starts taking steps on taking over the board. Would you tolerate that? Would you say, let's give the CEO more time? He may correct himself. He may be needing some more time to do some better things. Are you serious? What would you do? I mean, we in diaspora know how companies are run, right? You would fire him instantly.
So the policy is following. In a case of people who previously have done bloody things, they should face justice. They should be imprisoned or arrested or whatever. But in case of people who hadn't done bloody things, but who were just involved in corruption, because the number of this type of persons is very high, kind of hundreds of thousands. The policy should be following that. They should face the justice and they should recover what they have robbed from the state.
Whenever there is a revolution, the new revolutionary government has to give a political evaluation of the previous government. This particular government that's now here, the revolutionary, and I say quote unquote revolutionary, before they came to power, or before the revolution happened, before Serge Sarkisyan resigned, they were saying that the previous regime was a criminal regime and that Serge Sarkisyan was a criminal and blah, 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 all that stuff. We say, fine. If he was, why is he still walking around in freedom a year after the revolution?
How come a year and a half later, Serge Sarkisyan is still going free, and according to some legitimate rumors, is even having a mansion constructed for himself? How do you explain that? We reject a head of the state, we remove him from power. Nikol Pashinyan in his public speeches was accusing him in all the crimes.
But we cannot base our choices and moves on the assumptions or what's hanging in the air. This is something that we have run away.
So who were we removing from the power then? We were doing it without any evidence? If we didn't need any documented evidence for that, why do we need evidence now? That's the logic. And if we needed evidence, why did we remove him from power then? Why did Pashinyan took his place?
Sometimes it's very difficult to prove that they had they had robbed something.
It is possible.
In case of Sargsyan, I guess everyone knows that he was corrupt. Everyone knows that he made, if not billions of dollars, but hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm pretty sure billions. But it's difficult to prove.
But how do you know how many millions or how many billions the person stole? How do you put a price on that? Why do you deal with people like that? Isn't it justice to deliver justice to them? Or is it justice to say, okay, whatever you stole, return, let's agree that you return this amount, and then you go free? Well, I have a surprise for people who think so. In the United States and in other developed civilized countries with more or less normal state systems, people who steal money from the state, from the country, are not asked to pay back even 90% or 100%. The money is taken back. It's taken back by force. And these people are going to jail.
The rule of law, something that we very much wanted for our country, assumes that it is only when you have facts and evidence, when you have testimonies, and when you have a package that is not vulnerable, that you can take someone to court.
Well, the way they're treating him is the way they're not treating him. He should be treated like a criminal, and yet he's treated like a ordinary citizen, just walking around like everybody else.
It seems rather arbitrary in terms of not all of the country's so-called oligarchs or former officials have yet been fully investigated. For example, most recently, fresh charges against former Prime Minister Hakobyan demonstrates progress. But Kochadyan's sons have acquired millions of dollars of assets in bank accounts, not hidden, but no explanation of the origins.
There's so many others. There are countless others. There's Dikran Sarkisyan, the ex-prime minister, who's corrupt from top to bottom. He's not even mentioned. Then there are people who charges are actually brought against, like Manvel Grigoryan. He's been in prison for over a year under detention. I can't find any logical, reasonable, or legal reason why he hasn't been sentenced. His trial is still going on. This man was caught beyond red-handed. It's not like they caught a few cans of Spam in his house. There was tons of food, ammunition, cars, you name it. So the evidence
that was meant for the troops.
That was stolen. Yeah, that was stolen. There's no reason why he shouldn't be sentenced.
And Mr. Tsarukyan, the head of the prosperous Armenia, the second largest party in parliament, himself a so-called oligarch, should be facing the same kind of objective legal investigation as everyone else.
Should be, and will be.
Hopefully.
I don't think each of them we can say that everybody has the same sort of blame on them, but there are many people who have lot of questions to all of them, and those questions have to be redressed
in a court of law.
Not necessarily. The transitional justice system assumes also truth commissions, not only criminal justice, but also truth commissions. So that means the people have a right to know the truth about those years, but the architects of the system have to somehow come to criminal justice.
Of course, we have all the tools to solve this problem, and address these challenges within, for example, 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. But we don't want to do that, because for us it's very important to keep really rule of law in Armenia, to keep really democracy in Armenia, and to have really balanced society, balanced country. And our general goal is to achieve real harmony in our society.
Almost zero judges were really independent from executive branch. Judges were receiving calls from from high-ranking officials with orders how to deal with this or that issue. Now they're receiving sometimes call from other more, let's say, judges, from high-ranking judges from Supreme Court, from Constitutional Court maybe, and so they are not ideally independent. And also the corruption, the bribery is not over, because those are the same judges.
It is believed that many judges have folders with their names on them with the old regime leaders, where their mischiefs and corrupt acts are recorded. That could be video materials, that could be private life related, that could be anything. That could be also connections, conflicts of interest, and etc., etc. And when people have things like that on you, then you cannot be expected to rule objectively or to carry justice.
Drastic measures should have been taken in the area of the judiciary a year ago. At least we should have had a strategy on a roadmap or a concept, call it whatever you like, on what judicial reform the government was going to implement in the short term, in the medium term, and in the longer term. Because
here we are 1 year after the revolution, and still the same judges are in place.
yeah, the overwhelming majority of judges are the same.
On April 23rd, when Serge officially stepped down, almost everything could have been done that day. So this whole thing of saying the Prime Minister needs time, it's a new government, it's
vetting?
I think it's ludicrous. Oh well, vetting, that was beyond ludicrous, and they didn't even go as far as to translate the word. The word vetting in English is done. It's a process you do before the fact, before you hire someone and appoint someone, not after the fact. But okay, let's even assume that was correct. They didn't even do it after the fact. What happened with the vetting?
Now we see a belated prioritization of legal and judicial reform through a process of so-called vetting in terms of readdressing and reassessing the judges, weeding out the incompetent and the corrupt in terms of building a truly independent judiciary. But it has to follow legal procedure. This is the challenge.
Like what judges would, what would they do? They would take bribes and give receipts for that? So that would serve you as an evidence to remove them? No, what you do it the revolutionary way. You just dismiss the whole judicial system by the absolute mandate that the people had granted to you. And when you skip that point, you put the people's revolution in jeopardy and you betray the people's interests.
They are all our citizens. Those that don't have their hands bloody or have not engaged in corrupt mechanisms that can be proved now need to be protected by law as much as any other citizen.
In his own words, he says it needs surgical interference. We've been telling him for a year, do the damn surgery, don't prolong it. The longer you prolong it, the cancer spreads even more. And vetting is not only the monetary or the financial ability of the person, whether there was a corruption involved or not. Vetting is it's a security issue. Do you want to trust so-and-so in a position that requires high integrity? So the question of vetting is mostly integrity.
Even if it wasn't written, but there is even unwritten deal that those persons should be imprisoned who had done bloody things. Serge was a very corrupt person, but maybe even he was more corrupt than second president. But still, we have no evidence and we have no valuable information that he has done bloody things, he has killed someone, that he has ordered to use, I don't know, firearms against peaceful protests. So something that we clearly know about Robert Kočaran.
For the leader of the country to say to go surround the courts, He didn't have to do that. He had the mandate of the people who a year ago told Nikol Pashinyan, you have carte blanche, get rid of these criminals. He could have done that under a revolutionary law, which is accepted by the people.
Why didn't he?
He had promised, I think, to the US, to the European Union, and to Russians, and I can't say this is only a Russian thing, even though the Russian influence is very obvious nowadays. But I think he had promised back then that he would do everything according to the law and according to the Constitution. And that was something that at least the Russians got out of him. And this way now they're protected. Because to not go by the Constitution, not go by law, but if you go by the revolutionary standards, then Serge Sarkisyan would have been in jail now for treason, for corruption, for theft, for a number of other things. And there's plenty of things that they can go after.
It is easier to say than to actually achieve state sovereignty, but still we are witnessing some positions from the Prime Minister and the official representatives of the Armenian government, which are very lenient towards the main mentor, quote unquote, of Armenia, I mean Russia.
There was support from some officials in the previous regime for this to happen, because it was sort of too easy. It was an easy revolution.
A mine project that has been started nearby Germuk, a resort town that is exclusive and is a gem of Armenia, that also happens to sit above water resources of almost half of Armenia, that will inevitably be poisoned by the exploitation.
Inevitably.
Inevitably. There is absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind, including specialists, geologists, chemists, anybody who is unbiased and who understands what the situation is. It is an inevitable national security threat. However, Pashinyan's government is continuing to honor already expired license given by the regime of Serge Sarkisyan to the mining company, which is an offshore registered company to exploit Amusar. And Pashinyan himself is actively pushing forward with a project claiming that it will harm the image of Armenia, the business image of Armenia, if the government stops the company from mining and poisoning the country, in fact, which raises a lot of questions.
First of all, this deal was made with the previous regime.
Of course, and you should...
An illegal regime and illegitimate.
Yes, but you should also understand one thing. Such a deal, and even deals 100 times smaller or of a smaller scale, would never happen. Never a license would have been granted if there wasn't any shady dealings, if we put it in a politically correct way. I mean, I don't think there are too many people who doubt how these licenses were granted at the time. And now Pashinyan even doesn't consider the possibility of investigating how the license was obtained.
Why?
That's a very good question. Why?
People keep saying, well, what about the economic benefits? What about the dangers if the mining company took Armenia to court and so forth? As far as I'm concerned, if you have even one life lost, the economic benefits mean zero.
When we say no mining, it doesn't mean that we are against Nikol. We are not. We are protecting also Nikol, because Nikol now can't take all those lawsuits. We are here to support him, to save Amusar, because this mining all cause it's never good for Armenia and Armenian people.
The real key to success of Armenia's Velvet Revolution was the fact that this was an authentic, domestic-driven, indigenous, genuine change of government. It was not about geopolitics. There weren't European flags. This wasn't the US versus Russia.
There wasn't really a revolution if you put in charge somebody from old regime who served in a high-ranking national security position, and then you make him head of the national security agency or service. When you put the policemen who were involved in dealing with protesters on behalf of the former regimes and who was fighting you in the streets, you make him head of the police of the country. When all the judges, the whole judicial system, you leave them in charge, people, most of whom are alleged and believed by the absolute majority of the people to be absolutely corrupt, who have served the previous regime diligently, and who are appointed and cherry-picked by the heads of former regimes. So how do you call that a revolution? When you go around and complain about the existence of the former judicial system when it's your primary duty to remove them, and you still don't do anything about it.
The human rights abuses that happened previously have not been addressed yet. And there is a lot of concern, and people are waiting towards the restoration of justice system in Armenia.
We have a policy of zero tolerance towards corruption. So we're not going to say, well, in all societies there is some level of corruption, so we're going to tolerate it here and there. We are going to go till the end, eliminating corruption, and it also needs to become embedded in the dominant culture of the people. Bad money needs to be something that the society at large criticizes and wants to stay away from. Otherwise, we won't be successful.
The current Prime Minister brings instability to the public life because he enabled the old regime to start rising again. He cherry-picked 2 or 3 people to go to jail, not even to prison. And after charging them some amounts of money that is being presented as returning stolen finances to the state budget, but it's really charging them for their freedom, sending the money into the budget, but who knows what percentage is that. And in my opinion, it is a form of state corruption, when the state in a legal way is getting involved in a corrupt act.
They could have done a lot of things in this past year that they didn't do, and it's lost time. So this is the bad thing. The good thing is we're not going to go back. The bad thing is that we're going very slow, and there's going to be a lot of hiccups on the way. As I said, the previous regime cannot come back. It's an impossibility, but they're going to try. And in that trying process, we may end up with chaos. That chaos may be very painful.
We do not wish and we do not want the failure of Pashinyan government. Very sincerely, we do not wish it, and we want him to at least deliver some of the issues which he has promised, and the citizens, the population of Armenia and the whole Armenian people is waiting.
What the Pashinyan model of Armenia represents, a rare victory of non-violent people power, is an inherent threat to Putin in Russia. It's an inherent threat to the father-to-son dynasty in Azerbaijan. It's also an inspirational model for people in Moldova, Georgia, or in terms of the potency of people power in a non-violent way.
I'm sure that we are going in the right way to be fully devoted to the principles of democracy, of rule of law, of transparency, and for human rights, etc.
It is a degree of optimism, excitement still in Armenia, where for the first time in a very long time, the citizen is no longer a spectator, but an actor in determining the future of this country.
I think Armenia is where it is. It is in between East and between West, which means we for centuries we have had that mission to be bridging those two different type of civilizations, and we have done that for thousands of years, and we will do it for maybe another thousands also.
Even though Nikol Pashinyan has shown allegiance to Russia and has shown in a number of ways that they're still under Russian occupation, however, there's also some signs of self-respect. For example, the latest voting in the UN, for the first time in 30 years, Armenia did not vote with Russia. Their end stop is dictatorship. Our end stop is democracy.
Of course, we face some problems. Something is moving slower than we would like. Something is even moving not absolutely in the direction that we would like. But still, I'm positive because I know that the general will of what we want generally and what those guys want is the same. And for that reason, I'm very positive.
It's best to inform ourselves in order to understand that time moves on, that things change, that not everything appears to be what it appeared to be a year or two ago.
Sometimes I notice that people who live beyond the territory, they sometimes panic about the changes that are happening in Armenia that are not going in the direction they assumed they should be going. And this, my analysis shows that this comes from exactly not being here and not feeling the daily calm and the spirit of optimism that prevails in Armenia right now. So I believe at least one visit is worth it, to come and see how physically that change feels, and it will give a lot of reassurance and the type of confidence that I hope I am able to transmit to you through this camera right now, that for once in Armenia we have all the reasons to be optimistic. For once, at least in my lifetime, I have never seen a period such as this when we truly have the right for optimism.
So we invite everyone.
We are inviting everyone. Come and visit and see and participate.
Of course, diasporans should go and visit Armenia. It helps financially. It doesn't help in any other way. What must be done is actually moving to Armenia. And we shall, and we must, because we don't have any other choice.
My job as someone who cares for this country, who cares for this government to be successful, my job is to make sure that this government doesn't fall into those potholes that are on the road to a better Armenia.
Thank you very much, and I wish you and all of us all the best. Thank you very much.